Hello and welcome to episode 36 of Subplot of Course, a podcast discussing a new science fiction work on the second Tuesday of every month. I'm Stavros, and with me is someone who could murder just with his creepy smile, Charlie. Say hi, Charlie.
Stavros.
It's so true. It's so true, though. You never know.
You have it down pretty pat whenever you want to bring it down. Charlie teaches math. Also with me is someone who could compliment their own kids until their adversary jumped off a cliff, Vincent. Yeah,
no, actually, I didn't compliment my kids today. I actually spent the time killing John and eliminating him from the podcast, improving my chances of being the best podcaster on this recording tonight.
You're definitely in the running. Vincent's an epidemiologist. And finally, we also have someone with us who has researched 1,000 historically accurate ways to kill us so far. Adrian. Say hi, Adrian.
I'm your instructor today, so all of you do your best.
Oh, boy.
Thanks, we'll do our best. Adrian teaches English literature. And today, as you can't tell from the theme maybe, we're going to be talking about Battle Royale, a novel written by Koshun Takami and published in 1999 in Japanese and then in English in 2003. And of course, you should be prepared for spoilers. The plot of this novel, set in an alternate universe where Japan is part of a fascist superstate, the students of Shiroiwa Junior High School are selected to be part of the program, capital P program, an annual contest that pits the students of the class against one another in a fight to the death on an evacuated island. The program is run by instructor Sakamochi, kind of a sadistic dude. And almost immediately, mayhem begins when the students are set loose. Main character Shuya is almost immediately hooks up with the injured Noriko and quiet transfer student Shogo, who teases them with a plan to escape. The main antagonists of the novel are students in the class that decide to play the game as it is intended. Kazuo, leader of the so-called delinquents, who is a sociopath thanks to brain damage and murders his classmates with reckless abandon, and Mitsuko, who is sexually abused as a child and has a knack for tricking her classmates into situations where she can then murder them. But ultimately, Kazuo, armed with a machine gun, finishes off Mitsuko and battles Shuya, Shogo, and Noriko, but the trio comes out on top. Shogo, who had revealed he won the contest the previous year, fakes the killing of Shuya and Noriko to quote-unquote win the game in an effort for the trio to escape. The villainous Sakamochi anticipates the escape plot, but Shuya and Noriko do a surprise attack against the government soldiers, and while Shogo dies of his wounds, they end up stealing a boat. Sakamochi's dead, and they sail off into the sunset and are running from the cops as they try to escape to the American Empire.
Stavros,
yes.
I like how your summary is pretty much the first 100 and the last 100 pages of a 600-page book, where the middle 400 pages is watch the other 38 students die horribly.
I tried to block all that part out, honestly. I think that's all just filler,
Filler. I mean, there's so much character development.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Yes. Well, so the first thing I wanted to bring up, this book, first published in 1999. There's a lot of inspiration. It feels, at least, whether or not it's true or not, we'll see. But it feels like this is inspiration for a lot of other media. The most obvious of which may be the Battle Royale style video games. So like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Apex Legends, Fortnite, all that kind of stuff.
It's literally called Battle Royale.
Yeah. It must be a reference to this novel. It's got to be. But I mean, not only that. We've got the Hunger Games, which are directly is very, very similar to this novel, whether or not the author admits it. So it seems like this is a big component of it's very influential, and on top of being a cult classic. Would you guys agree?
And on top of that, it's extremely popular with the public, right? I mean, Hunger Games is so popular with just everyone in America, and I imagine internationally. And the video games are multi-million-dollar games. People are playing them every single day, all the time. There's something very odd about the fact that we are very fascinated with this Battle Royale kind of setup, but this book makes it so horrifying that you kind of don't want it anybody to enjoy this kind of situation.
Well, I think it's important that it happened so late, right? I mean, this book came out in 2002 in the West, right? And it's not until when was PUBG? 2014, I want to say.
Yeah, much
maybe earlier than that, right? Yeah. So like the clear influence there is probably Hunger Games, which is a far more heroic version of the same problem, right? And to clarify, right, I think the book, I'd forgotten this the first time I read it. The book references the wrestling battle royale as the actual influence for the larger game setup, right? Which is also kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's called a battle royale because it's like everybody enters, only one person leaves. It's the basic premise of that event in wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So it feels inarguable that this is definitely something that started I would even call it a cultural phenomenon, honestly.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
because I would say it's like even just like the coming of age child murder tournament seems to be a genre. Like I think even last year we read Red Rising, which had like kind of a version of this. You know, it's different with like, but this is not something that is like a one-off thing.
And explicitly like Japanese genre, right? Like the murder game pops up all the time, right? Danganronpa, the most recent, what is that recent game that just came out from the same creator of Danganronpa, Death Come True, that just came out last week, right? This constant like fascination with death and competition, and I don't know. It seems very different from the West versions of these, which are very often just like straightforward hero narratives, right? There isn't that same overarching structure.
Sure. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Well,
so is the question why then? Like why?
I guess we're just identifying it as, you know. Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if we're really qualified to say. I mean, like you said, Adrian, I think there's in the Western culture there's a lot more like turn it into heroic situation, whereas this book is very grisly and bloody and horrific, like kind of like more horror movie like.
Like, it seems like in the West they managed to turn it into kind of like a social hierarchy thing where it's like, watch the person who isn't supposed to win, who's supposed to be at the disadvantage, like, work their way up through the top through merit or something like that. That seems to be how it generally works. And
like, the Hunger Games puts a lot of emphasis on the kind of the representation of the fight, right? It's televised, it's very much an audience for it, and it doesn't feel like there's like an audience for this, right? I mean, there is, but it's very subdued, right? The action is entirely on the students and the terrible things they do to each other, and not on like the larger social framework of the effect of this.
Yeah, you're totally right. There's no, there's
like there's no stadiums of people like watching this, right? And unlike Hunger Games,
right? Or even like a battle or like a Fortnite game where it's, you know, we've got esports for it and that kind of stuff. So kind of like by definition spectator, whereas this book is more. It just the violence is just contained happening on the island there. Mm-hmm. So I can for sure see that.
Yeah. Like I'd almost argue in the book it's more of kind of just a setting device to put these characters in this more personal situation versus it supposedly being this like bigger, grander, like look at this world type deal.
That's what the author said, right? Something like he just had a dream one day where he heard a teacher like, okay, it's time to kill each other, and that's the whole inspiration for the book.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite nuts.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the theme of this book. So a little bit of background. I despised about 90% of this book. I complained about it while we were reading it, but I will. Let me go into why, because I feel like this needs to come out at some point.
Stavros' rant.
Really a little ranty, but like there's so much. I mean, the obvious hook of this book is like you said, Adrian. Like, what if students killed each other, right? And there's so much focus on, you know, every student. You know, however many students this starts out with. Like, there's almost every single one of them, you get to hear the backstory about like what they think about what's happening and how they're cracking under pressure, and you get just excruciatingly detailed descriptions of how, you know, what happens when they, you know, it starts out with stabbing and chopping and ends up with guns shooting and explosions. And I mean, these kids are 15 or whatever, and I just found it. I had a very hard time getting through this one. That's kind of the.
But why, Stavros? Like, I mean, you described like what happened, but like psychologically,
is that not enough?
I want to know what the block.
Let's get detailed into this here. Yeah.
Tell me why, Stavros.
Which description really bothered you the most? Let's start
Oh God, yeah.
Lemons. Tell me about the lemons.
It was the sliced lemon on the cooking show analogy. I did not. Just why?
Someone got cut, and
yes.
the author describes it as the sound that is made when a lemon is cut against a chopping board. And Stavros flipped out. Like, I remember
I'm
extremely upset about that.
And that's like the third character who dies like from another student on page, where you're just, and I was like, oh no, Stavros is gonna like
Stavros out already because he's not
page like 100 of 600 pages and he's already flipping out.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to make you feel better about this.
Okay.
So there's like a fairly good like rule of thumb here is that utopias are about our fears and dystopias are about our hopes. And so my question to all of you is like, what do you think the hope is here? Like, what is being celebrated? Right, so like utopias are boring unless there's something that is kind of like hiding, essentially, right? That's the fear part. And dystopias are just like terrible, except that they have something that they're trying to kind of valorize, right? There's some kind of human principle, like The Walking Dead is a good example of this, right? Where it's like the ability to protect humanity is so important there. So I'm curious for all of you, because I actually don't have a good answer for this. Like, what do you think this book is trying to protect or valorize or celebrate?
I mean, Stavros is like nothing.
I have a great answer for that, and I think. By and large, there's no like I'm trying to say that there is a theme here, but it doesn't come out until the very end. Most of this book is like lol, watch kids kill each other in very gruesome ways, and I think it feels to me like a shock thing. Like ooh, like watch that teenager kill the other one because she was sexually abused when she was 9 or whatever. And it's like, wow, that's so shocking. And I'm thinking that I'm just like, oh, why am I reading this?
No. Well, so Stavros, I'll throw it back at you a little bit. Sorry,
okay.
Adrian, I'm detracting it from the
original
question of what we're trying to save here. But like, if we four were put on the island with relative strangers,
okay,
and you knew that someone was starting to kill other people, it's not so much that like, oh, because I was sexually abused, now I'm killing people. But imagine like, what would be the trigger for you to flip where you're like, I am no longer like completely safe. I can no longer rationally dialogue my way through this. And people I meet are probably going to be kind of crazy and like relatively like psychopathical. And like, I actually have to play the game if I want to survive. Like there's this very weird, like the writing was actually very compelling and very strange. Like there are all sorts of scenarios where like, people were misunderstood, like two people who were fighting and a third party watching and be like, oh my God, that kid who I always was friends with, I didn't think he had it in him to kill someone. He's obviously a murderer. I'm very scared of him now. And then goes on to be like, oh my God, like I'm now fearful of all people. Like there was a lot of like dialogue and like, psychological, like internal monologue that was like, it actually resonated with me to a certain extent because if I saw Stavros like, bashing some kid's head in with a rock, I'd be like, shit, I never thought Stavros could actually kill someone, but now I've seen Stavros kill someone, that's a little bit shocking to me. Like, I would definitely look at Stavros differently the next time I ran into him, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much as like, oh, she was sexually abused, so now she's killing people. It was more like well, yes, she was sexually abused, but then you also have the trigger of like all sorts of other people killing each other, and now you're thrown in a very weird situation where there's no police, there's no guidelines. Literally, they want you to kill people, and how do you react? Like, do you try and dialogue your way through it?
I mean, of course, you're throwing a bunch of kids into a high-stress situation. Of course, people are going to crack. But that's not... I feel like that's not the hook of the book. The hook of the book is read about kids killing each other in gruesome ways. Wow, so cool cultural phenomenon now.
But you can also invert that, right, and look instead at the kids who group together, the people who try to fight against the game, right?
Yes.
That you could really like valorize Shinji, right, who is given a lot of page space on the book, right? It's like this great hero who is just sort of like fails because he lets the inhumane situation get to him, essentially, right? He has a very heroic narrative. Right?
Yes. So actually, that was the point I was going to eventually make is, so much of the book is spent on describing the kids' lives and then killing them in gruesome ways. But I feel like there is a theme that emerged right at the end that I was actually super on board with. And that was that, Shuya is pitched as this, rock star, he takes up the culture from the Americas and makes him kind of a rebel. And you find out that the government, maintains this program much in the same way as Hunger Games to sow distrust between the people of the country. And so you see the theme emerge where Shuya has been trying to unite people this whole time, only fights when he absolutely has to. And, of course he wins at the end and kind of is fighting the man at the end. And I thought that part was very compelling. But that's not the focus of the book, is it? The focus of the book is describe kids. Oh man, they're cracked. Oh, they're dead now. Cool.
I assume that you chose this book because it's July 4th tomorrow. At
the time of the recording, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know.
Hands to our heart and sing Bruce Springsteen songs together.
We will not go quietly into the night. We will not go down without a fight.
I don't know. Am I wrong? I mean, it's a theme that emerges, and I enjoyed that a lot. But that's not the focus of the book.
What was the name of the crazy guy again? The sociopath.
Kazuo,
yeah. So I think Kazuo really crystallizes where the tension of the book is, where he's like, oh, I flipped a coin because I can either fight the government or kill my friends, right? And it's kind of weird that that's like the 50-50 right there, right? It's like you can fight an entire government or you kill your friends, and this is but that feels like the whole frame of the book, right? It's like, do the kids choose to stand against the government or do the kids choose to kill each other? And it seems like standing against is actually an obtainable goal, all the way throughout the book, right? That 15-year-olds can figure out the programming on these advanced necklaces that are going to kill you and can hack into the government mainframes with a cell phone.
Two separate students hack the government.
Right?
The main one of the main characters who helps them over the government, Shogo, he hacked it before he got into the second program to fight them the second time. Yeah. But the other main character was oh my god, I can hack it spontaneously just with my own uncle's past history. It's oh my god, all these characters are highly unrealistic. I agree with you, Stavros, but putting them in the situation is also highly unrealistic. But I feel like there's so many video games and so many books which put you in those situations where oh yeah, time travel is a reality, and living on a universe 50 billion galaxies away is a reality. It's oh, those are also highly impractical situations. Sure. But we go with it.
That's true.
And this one's just so weird the way this one plays out.
Yeah, so you're telling me in the same way that time travel is the centerpiece of the time machine, and you're going with it. You're reading Battle Royale, and you're teenager murder. Yeah, I'm going with it.
No, it's you have to. If you're going to read the book. Yeah.
That's true.
If you don't want to go with it, you don't read the book.
That's true.
If you have to finish a book, you have to.
No. Objection. This is because there's a difference between galaxies are 50 million years away, right? And children who have the acumen to hack the government, right? Or children who have had to subdue parts of their town with their gang member friends, right? There's a different you don't want to the 14-year-olds who are doing things that 30 or 40-year-olds should be doing, right? Just having gang empires, prostitution rings, and things like that. I gotta call unrealistic on that.
Well, I know it's unrealistic, but I would say time travel. What do you think is going to happen first? Time travel? Or a kid who hacks an underage kid who hacks a government, which I would say there are probably some hackers out there who are underage who have gotten into the CIA or done crazy stuff who are child prodigies. You know what I'm talking about? They're both equally improbable, but I would actually say time travel at this point is less probable than a kid hacking the government.
But as Stav said, what is the likelihood of two of those kids in the same middle school class at the same there's a whole issue of consistency, world consistency matters too, right? Yeah. You can make time travel sensible in a world if it's coherent with that world. The notion of these kids being children doesn't feel very coherent to me.
Yeah, and that's actually something I wanted to touch on too. Is in order to make this plot come together, not only is it alternate history Japan, but also a sociopath, the sociopath who happened to have brain damage, and the girl who happened to be, horribly sexually abused when she was very young, and a super genius hacker, all the same class. In order for to pull, I'm not saying it's not cool. It makes for an interesting read if you're into teenager murder, but
Stavros, if you can't believe those kids are in the same class, that just means you were the fat loser kid who died first.
He was scared for his life.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of those kids in the class who are what the fuck? Why are there two hacker kids and a psychopath in my class? Why can't I go to the normal class? I'm surrounded by all the crazies. I didn't sign up for this. There were 38 people. You're they're filler. No, those 38 kids were us.
But the one thing I would say is, like, clearly, it's funny because the material is so serious and dark, but in terms of, like, the tone of the characters, this feels a lot more like a light novel. So all of the characters are kind of heightened in terms of what they can do and what their character archetypes are. Like, Shogo's, like, the kind of older, stoic, cool kid, who, yes, of course, also hacked a mainframe for some reason. And it's like, I mean,
Shogo had a reason because he was in last year's program where he did.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he was like, well, fuck that. I want to fight against the government, so I'm going to learn how to hack. So I was like, okay, I'll give you that one.
So I think it's mostly a thing of buying into the tone. So if you're already put off by the whole, like, premise and, like you said, kind of the slasher-esque nature of the book, like, you're not going to buy into how the characters are written or put into the plot. Like, you know, whereas normally you could be like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever, because, you know, you're clearly reading something that's genre fiction of some sort.
I mean, there is an argument to be made here, right, though, which is that, you know, that this is what they make a big deal about how this is one of, like, hundreds of these going on. Like, every prefecture has their own game, right? And so the argument would be like, this is what the society produces, right? Is that it doesn't allow people to be children. You kind of have to have, like, you know, you're either really damaged by the society or you are, you know, the Japanese zero cool, right, who has to kind of try to fight against that society.
Yeah. Though, because bringing it way back to the beginning of this current discussion in terms of, like, what's the positive aspect of this book, I'd almost argue it's that despite this society with all this horrible stuff, so many of these kids are just, like, living normal lives. Like, they're just kind of, like, average kids. And so that's the point of the middle 400 pages of the book, is kind of revealing to you, like, oh, this kid's in this little tea ceremony society that she's working towards. This kid is, you know, the track player, and it's kind of bringing you into all their little personal lives that have been affected by this horrible world and this horrible government. But until now, it's like they've been kind of just making their way through it.
Oh, but that's so double-edged, though, right? Because they're also, therefore, like, easy victims for the system.
Well, yes.
I mean, the other thing that I was, like, kind of freaked out was, like, if you lived in a society where the government was going to randomly pick some of your kids to go and murder each other, why the fuck would you continue to live in that empire? Like, I'm just thinking because, like, I'm a father of 2 children. If the United States started saying that they were just going to, like, randomly pick my kids out of school and start making them murder other kids, I'd be like, fuck this country. I'm going to Canada. Like, you know, like, I mean...
I don't think they can leave.
So at the start, they mentioned, like, oh, if you ran off to another country, like, as a dissident or whatever, you'd probably get murdered by the government. And, like, that stuff happens in real life where it's like, oh, this person, like, moved to England from some other place, and then he was stabbed in the leg with, like, high-grade radioactive materials through, like, a secret
that was Russia.
thing.
That was Russia.
Yeah.
There's the Hunger Games solution, too, right? Which is, like, you basically just, like, train your kids for this in case they get chosen.
Yes.
Yeah. I did get the impression that the chances are so small.
And the difference in the Hunger Games, like, kids actually volunteer, and it's like, for the upper classes, it's a big reward to be, like, the kid who wins the Hunger Games. Whereas here, like they said, yeah, it's hundreds of classes per year, but your chances are so small that most people are just like, I can't worry about that.
But if you don't worry about it, then what is the impact of the games? Like, if you don't really care about the games, then, like, the government was, like, doing this as a strategy to, like, motivate their population. I think in the beginning they said to produce more children, which I didn't get. It's like, why would you kill children to make people produce more children?
That was that was the hypothesis, right? But the truth comes out at the end, where it's just to make them distrustful of everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just so weird. I was just like,
Well, it would encourage you to produce a second baby and not just one, in case your first baby got tossed in the Hunger Games into the Battle Royale.
Sure.
Yeah.
But then the second one could also get thrown into. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like it's it's kind of an implied threat that you are powerless. We can take your kids, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you know what? Even if your kids get thrown in, we're not going to kill them. We're going to make their friends kill them. So, like, that's how the system, quote, is supposedly supposed to work.
And I think Sakamoto's point at the end is, like, if the system is too upfront about killing you, then people might revolt, right? So just the mere possibility, right, that your kid may enter it, right, and that kind of plants that seed of mistrust that will never elevate to the point of being dissent.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I would dissent against an empire, but I would definitely run my ass off for a while.
I mean, if Shura can do it at the end, like, why can't anybody else? That's actually a fairly good question, too.
It's like, all the kids in Japan are like, peace, we're going to another country for education.
Well, because, like, I feel like this is the type of thing where I know we read like, I know an argument in books is when people read books with, like, quote, the chosen one or whatever, they're like, it's so lame that, of course, like, he happens to do everything right. Like, my argument against that criticism is, for a lot of times, you're reading about, like, the one person who managed to be in the right situation with the right set of things that made it work. So you're reading about that story. You're not necessarily reading about how
like
this person, like, you know, in fantasy, oftentimes it is destined or whatever, but, like, especially in sci-fi, it's more so the person who just happened to be in the right situation with the right things, even if, like, in his or her situation feels like a terrible thing.
Yeah, because Shuya kind of sucks if everyone's attracted to him for some reason.
He's the rocker guy, and he was really good at the sports.
But he's not a playboy like Shinji, so he's like much better in that respect.
Yeah,
that's the reason why we're all bitter, because none of us were this guy.
That's right.
Is that why I'm upset? This book?
Yeah, Stavros. That's
Again, all it means is that you were not the Shuya, Stavros.
Where are these Asian parents where like these kids can sleep around so easily? Like, how is this happening?
Yeah, you know,
they didn't raise this Asian child.
Do you hear like news stories about like your typical middle school, even in like America today and that sort of thing? I know that wasn't our situation, but
well, actually, you know, you guys bring up a good point that in this fascist authoritarian state, there's evidence of corruption and you know, immoral activity all over the freaking place. Shuya is just like a dude in junior high school, and he has like access to as much black market rock as he potentially wants. And, you know, a bunch of the other students are said to engage in prostitution when they're 15 at the outside. So it's kind of strange. And, you know, Vincent, you're bringing up like, you know, why don't they just up and leave the country? It's kind of strange the level of control that the government seems to have in this book. They seem to have like you know, they kind of let the black market stuff in, but then again also run these crazy programs where a bunch of people die.
Yeah, right.
Stavros, have you heard about like what actually happens in totalitarian countries?
Are you saying that this is what it's really like? Have you done the research?
No, I'm not saying that that's what it's really like, but like scary shit.
There's a Chinese science fiction book that touches on this a little bit, where it's like the question, like, how is a government able to control its people so well? And this book actually touches on it too, where it's like, well, it's a government that is like really well conditioned for the ethnic Japanese, right? Like it's
Sure.
so well fitted for the culture that does this work. In the Chinese novel, something like, we have no idea. People just seem to like totalitarian rule like secretly, and they don't seem to have that like edge to decide like revolt. So like when the government seems in control, it's actually just like haphazard essentially. You know, and so I wonder if that's kind of what's going on here, like where the government is not all powerful, but there's just like a good fit between the way that the government works and the way the Japanese people.
Interesting.
And so that might be the larger point, right?
Yeah. I think you could be onto something there. But let me ask you this: how'd you guys feel about how the American Empire is portrayed from what little information we do have?
You mean the Empire of Bruce Springsteen?
I mean,
that's what we see.
The same. I feel like, despite the fact that half the world, like the other across the Pacific Ocean, things are totally different. Things are moving on relatively the same as regular, real-world America in this book.
So roughly accurate is what you're saying?
I will say that, like, I don't think I give Bruce Springsteen enough credit, because I recently was watching movies like on Amazon and Netflix because of COVID and quarantine and stuff like that. There were an inordinate number of like movies and productions where they reference like Bruce Springsteen and like their influence on like freedom and society. And like, I know that he won either like a Nobel Peace Prize or something along those lines for his like, you know, anti-war kind of like songs and stuff like that. I'm just so surprised that people from all around the world are so inspired by Bruce Springsteen, where like, I feel like I grew up in America. I never really, like, I know some of his songs, but I never found him that inspirational, which is kind
Last year I saw some movie trailer, which is about like an Indian kid in
yes, that's
like in
right.
the United
London.
Kingdom who is obsessed specifically with Bruce Springsteen. Like, for some reason, he is always the guy, and this just speaks to my like music illiteracy or ignorance to know like the full depth of how important he is. But I've just kind of picked like listen to his music and picked it up through osmosis of just like how influential he is in terms of this type of feeling like around the world in terms of the effect of music.
Isn't it odd? Like every other country seems so inspired by Bruce Springsteen, and like we Americans, us four,
We have so much rock music.
Yeah.
Plenty of people love Bruce Springsteen.
Us four,
Yeah.
though. Like, I'm just surprised that us as Americans, we don't appreciate
That's
it.
We're
because
not
we're
a
nerds.
representative sample of
We
America.
are.
Yeah, I don't think so.
We are spending an hour of our Friday evening talking about a sci-fi book from the 90s that we decided to read rather than listening to music or doing something cool.
You have a fair point there, Charlie.
go back
Podcasting
to
is
my-
cool. Stop. Come on, Charlie.
To go back to my original question, like, what is the
Yes.
novel celebrating? Like, rock music seems to be a part of it, and America seems to be a part of it, right? And I just think it's worth thinking about, like, yeah, like, what is supposed to be the moral of the story here? You know, like, what are we supposed to take here as, like, this is the good thing? And,
Speaking of Adrian, does anyone know like what specific Japan? Because this book is written in Japan in the late 90s. You said, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like,
99.
what would be specifically like the thing going on in Japan in late 90s? Like, because I know, like, I'm like vaguely aware of stuff like they've had some super long recession forever, and isn't this right in the middle of that? Like some lost generation type stuff. Like, I don't know any of the specifics about it, so correct me if I'm horrifically wrong. I feel like there's something culturally that I would have to look up to see if this book is drawing from specifically.
I know there was a mass child murder, like, or some sort of like killing amongst kids, like in the year before this book was published. And so, like,
was
they
there?
didn't want to publish this book, or like it didn't make it to the finals of some like prestigious award. But then afterwards, like, it totally took off. I guess it's kind of like writing a book about Columbine, like the year after Columbine happened, and then like oh shit, we shouldn't read this book, and then basically everyone in the country be like, oh, let's read this book. This is awesome.
Well, you'll remember, like, in the 80s, right, there was so much fear of Japanese companies, right? There was that UHF, like, fake Sony commercial, right? Like, you know, Sony because Caucasians are too damn tall, right? Like, that when Asians can, like, get so close to the machinery and therefore, like, make better machines, right? There was RoboCop, right? Like, the Japanese, like, buying Detroit. There was all of this fear of Japan as a world power, right? And then there was that massive deflationary crisis in the 90s. Right, where, you know, houses in Japan are still worth like 30% of what they were during the height of the Japanese economy back in the 80s. You know, and they're still kind of dealing with the effects of a deflationary spin, and that's definitely like right at the heart of this novel too, or at least the time it was written.
Interesting. How would you say
that's like truly? Go ahead.
Is that coming through in the novel at all? Do you think, or?
I mean, I think there's something like really terrifying. Like, a deflationary spin is terrifying, you know,
sure.
because everything is just like all the prices are going down, so nobody wants to buy anything, so people lose jobs, and like, yeah, like, I mean, it's so much worse in many ways than like an inflationary crisis is, which feels at least like climactic, right? And I think that does feel like there's something there, like in the sense of like the Japanese are sort of notoriously, at least stereotypically portrayed, right, as a kind of, you know, like herd people, right, that they kind of bow to authority, that they kind of subject themselves to larger systems without critically engaging with those systems, and that feels like what happened in the inflation crisis, right, where like people just stopped buying things and nobody interceded in this economic crisis, and things just like got terrible. And they're still dealing with it now, right? Like, as like a people who are not theoretically, again, like, this is stereotypical depiction, right? Seen as like creative in that sense, or dynamic in that sense. And so, like, it kind of jives with this sense of like a people who would allow a totalitarian government just because they couldn't quite be bothered to kind of gather the revolutionary energy needed to reject it, right? Again, that's a very stereotypical reading, definitely not the actual Japanese people, but that's probably, yeah, it's one way to think of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I could potentially see that. But to get back to your question about like what's the hopeful element, you know, I'm just going to go back to what I said about the theme, where it's like the rock star America inspired togetherness against the, you know, totalitarian fascism, mean people that makes people kill one another. I mean, that's got to be the glimmering bit.
No, I think Stavros' real hope was the fact that there was a last page of this book and he was getting closer and closer to it.
Maybe.
My interpretation of the whatever, like, if you want a glimmering hope, is that, like, you know, even though some kids like went insane or something just being put in the situation, but the thing is, very few of the children decide to like wholeheartly jump into it instantly. So like,
sure.
Out of a class of 42, like, how many of them even really try like to sneakily murder somebody? Like, I feel like that's, considering how much of the book is specifically built on developing just these characters in their everyday normal 15-year-old lives. Yeah, they might be a little archetypal or a little heightened, but the idea that most of them don't just become brutal murderers. Like, I feel like it's almost a cop-out that Kazuo has this, like, brain injury that he doesn't feel. Like, that's my least favorite. Like, we'll skip to the end. That's my least favorite part of the book. But because I feel like the theme is, despite this being a known entity, that, like, most people can at least consciously reject this, if not, like, psychologically not go insane from the pressure of it or something like that.
Yeah, I'll chime in, and I have to echo Charlie's opinion about this. But as a statistician, I want to bring in a few numbers. So, class of about 40-ish. Let's round it up to 50, right? So you double that, and that's 100 people, and you can start making percentages out of that. So 2 of them are mass murderers, the girl and the guy. So I would say in society, about 4% of us would actually be willing to commit a murder at any given point. There's like 2 hackers, which is about 4% of the population are hackers, and there's like. The rest of the people were very average Joe Schmoes and a few heroes and a few kind of nice people. So about same number of the vast majority of people are normal and maybe 4% of us are heroes. So like when I think about it, I was like, that's actually kind of hopeful for a totalitarian East Asian like state where like everyone conforms to the government's wishes and desires, for there to only be 4% of the population being mass murderers and the 4% of the population to be heroes, or actually it was 6% because there are 3 heroes who wanted to fight back. And there are 4 characters. There was Shogo, and then there was the track star, and then there was the main 2 characters. So that's actually more heroes than there are mass murderers. That's kind of hopeful. I gotta say, that's kind of hopeful.
Is it though? Like 4% of the population? It seems like a lot.
No, but the thing is, that's not like in the United States where you have freedom of speech and everyone can be like voice what they want. This is like in a totalitarian state where if you do that shit, we kill your parents. And they did kill a lot of these kids' parents.
Yeah.
And if I were a kid and my parents got killed, like I could either be revolutionary, or I'd be like scared shitless, and I would just like I'm never going to do anything against government because they're going to kill me too. So more heroes than mass murderers. Not bad, Japan.
I mean, to counter statistics here, right? I mean, Japan is probably the safest country in the world. I think that's actually statistically true, right? And so I think one question there is how do you generate revolutionary violence in a society like that? How do you get people to fight against government when they are, when there isn't that sort of incipient, violent energy that is so kind of the American trademark, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me, isn't that the point of, what was it, that new In Japan Godzilla movie that came out, where isn't 90% of the movie is people in Japan sitting around being like, we should do stuff, but let's argue about it first as Godzilla kills everybody?
I don't know, but that sounds wonderful.
I haven't seen that one yet, but I've heard a large portion of the movie is just government people in boardrooms not deciding on anything.
Sounds like asking coronavirus.
Everything's too real.
Too topical. All right, so let's move. I just wanted to briefly touch on something that I was feeling when I was reading this book, and that was the kind of horror movie vibe I was getting from it. Although I will say, as I was putting this into the podcast notes, I feel like this kind of fell away towards the end of the book, where there's this basically a happy ending where the main characters, a few of the main characters escape. But there's, a large component of this novel is, bad situation. And then several characters sort of try and do something to try and either get into a group or, in Shinji's case, put together this bomb. He has this whole plan. But then the book just kind of offers you this little glimmer of hope and then smothers it. And then offers you a little glimmer of hope and smothers it. So when I was getting towards the end, I was like, oh no, this is not going to end well at all. And then I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, yeah, take that, Sakamochi, whatever. But that taking away the glimmers of hope, the extreme violence, of course, it feels like a slasher movie to me. And then crazy maniacal villains that have, it felt like kind of just a stereotype, when Kazuo's going after them, showing no emotion. I was like, wow, this is just a, kind of a slasher, antagonist that's doesn't feel anything as he's murdering people. But I'm wondering if you guys kind of got that vibe, or am I just hitting an obvious, that's obviously what they're going for?
I think that's the reason I actually find the book so interesting, is they build up these characters so that you identify with this person who just dies. That's half of it. Okay. A lot of the times you have also been in the shoes of the other character, so you are also the murderer in these situations as the reader. So, I think, and it's not up to you to decide which you would be, because the idea is you could never know until you were dumped in this situation of your head's going to explode or you better do this.
Right.
So,
All I heard was that Charlie wanted to be a murderer, and I thought of Charlie Smile, and I was thinking, that's fitting.
Okay, I got.
So sad.
I'll defend Charlie here for a second. There's a pretty seminal argument about horror movies, which goes something like, in the beginning of a horror movie, you are made to sympathize with the monster or the slasher, like because you see the movie through their eyes, like almost all the time, right?
Okay.
And horror movies are also basically like morality plays, insofar as like everyone who's killed has transgressed in some way. There's some sort of sin that they've committed that there's a reason they get eliminated. Right, that's what they play up in Cabin in the Woods, right? That Joss Whedon film of a few years ago, and so like it kind of makes sense, right? That even Shogo in this book can't survive because of whatever crimes he committed to win the game last time, right? That only Shuya and what's her name, right? These people who kind of like tried to stay on the Noriko, right? Who stay on like the good side of things, right? That they are allowed to escape this horror movie. So I think that your analogy is pretty apt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad. Hooray! There's actually better context that you're able to articulate. But yeah,
that's the thing, is like so much of the book is kind of like a dumb slasher film. So if you can't get past that, like I get why you wouldn't even bother to invest yourself in it. But once I found myself invested in it, it's like I was so interested in the characters, like especially the fact that it counts down how many characters are left towards the end. So once it got around 6, I was like, I have no idea who the 6 characters. Like I know the other 5 easily. So when they randomly show her for a chapter where it's clear she has just gone insane and dies instantly the moment you meet her, like it's like that's almost playing on what makes.
Oh, she was the Sailor Scout one, right?
Yeah, the one who's like literally like.
She was like delusional. It was like, I'm a superhero. I charge a big bag.
yeah.
He shot her.
Also, I wonder
like,
if it makes a big difference reading it physically versus
Yeah.
actually like listening to it, because like I have a bad habit of checking like, okay, how many pages to the end of the next chapter, but it also meant because every chapter begins with how many students are alive, I would know like how many people die every chapter. And so like I constantly keep like as it got lower and lower, I'd be trying to start keeping track of like who's left and stuff like that. So
Nice.
Interesting. Okay, well, yeah, I just wanted to make draw that parallel there, and it's interesting. Yeah, you're right that Shuya and Noriko don't really commit any bads.
Though I do have to point out that, because I remember I have another friend who's watched the anime version or read the manga or something like that, and he's like, Noriko's useless and doesn't do anything. And I'm like, no, she kills Kazuo at the end. Like, she actually does something. Like, she kills just as many people as Katniss does in all of Hunger Games. And, it is actually screwed up some anyway.
All right. All right, so let's jump into our contest topic here to move things right along. So we're gonna have a little game where we're going to talk about. I know.
Protest.
This is a fascist podcast. You can't protest.
Fight the man.
All right. So the question here is.
My Bruce Springsteen playlist.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta pump that up. All right. Yeah. So the question here is: if you knew that you were going to be in the program, and you could take any one item with you, we had foreknowledge of the program, and this one item would help you succeed, what would it be and why?
Wait, so do you mean like choosing your weapons included, or you mean like another item in addition to your government assigned random weapon?
I would say it's whatever you think. I mean, your weapon is random and unknown, so this would be the one thing you could rely upon.
Yeah, because in this book they don't search your backpacks for whatever reason, so that's the reason why. Like Shinji, the hacker kid, actually had like a cell phone that was hacked, and he was able to hack the government while he was on the island, of all things. And people had all sorts of other shit too. So it's like if you could sneak one thing in your backpack, you could probably sneak a bunch of things. So that's just one thing.
Yeah, so this is assuming a one thing snuck in your backpack type situation. As usual, you cannot vote for yourself. So I will go first. I'm not too huge on actual murder, to be honest, so it wouldn't be a weapon. And I would pick some kind of radio 4G or 5G jammer. And I would think the reasoning for that would be pretty obvious. I would think that the callers would operate on some kind of frequency like that, and I feel like it would prevent any kind of remote detonations as well as detection. So I feel like it would maximize your chance for escape if you had some kind of pocket-sized jammer. And I feel like these things do exist. Some kind of personal like localized area jammers. So that is my pick. Let's go to Adrian. Adrian, what is your item you would bring with you?
Vape pen.
Vape pen. All right, you have to explain this.
Okay,
I understand why.
Who knows the most about Battle Royale games right now? Fortnite players. Who are Fortnite players? Mostly young teenagers, and what do young teenagers do? They vape. So, since young teenagers don't know formal logic, if I have a vape pen, I will inherit their young teenager Battle Royale powers.
So you'll be able to kill all of us that much easier.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes complete
Vape
sense.
pen. Yeah,
Vape
totally.
pen. Great. All right. How about you, Charlie? What is your one item you would bring with you?
Do you want my realistic, pessimistic answer or my optimistic, I'm actually trying answer?
Whatever you want. But you can only choose one.
Fine. Then I choose a handgun so that I can go, well, the government's going to make us all murder each other. I don't think I can go in a murder tournament. I just shoot myself.
Wow.
Oh, kill yourself.
Charlie, okay?
I don't want to murder people.
No, Charlie.
I don't want to murder people, and I don't know there's going to be cliffs to jump off of.
That's true. No way.
I gotta say,
I don't want to get murdered.
Let me put it this way, though, Charlie. Your cowardly way out has provided a gun to someone else who finds your body. Who will then use your weapon to kill many other people. So you're an accessory.
Is there only one bullet, maybe? Is that the way around there?
You're like a Derringer? Is that what he wants?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because you know what? They're all going to murder each other anyway. If one of them gets a gun, it's probably going to be one of the crazy useless kids who's just going to get shot by the kid with no emotions anyway.
It's got a point. I mean, if 4% of the population is crazy maniacs, chances are pretty high. All right. How about you, Vincent? What's your pick?
All right, so Stavros, my initial pick was something very similar to yours.
Okay.
So I'm going to retract that one, but I will tell you what it was.
Okay.
It was miniaturized EMP device. Then the idea would be that I could get myself and my friends together, set the EMP off, and then blow our collars, essentially. Or just essentially neutralize them. We'd all be theoretically dead. We'd go hide somewhere on the island.
Wait.
Yes.
Are you essentially Shogo and you know how, like, that there's collars and stuff like that? Because nobody knows that until they're on the island.
Well, the idea is that if you're going to sneak something in your backpack, then you know something's up, right?
Okay, sure.
It's not like then I'm going to bring a pen because
I would just have my vape pen with me all the time. I don't know what you're talking about.
That is true. Adrian is prepared for gaming as well as apocalyptic scenarios. All at once.
Vincent, it's funny you say that. I had the same thought, some kind of EMP device, but then I Googled around and I'm not sure that they're portable.
You can't get a miniature one?
I don't know if that exists. I'm not an expert. Maybe John would know if he was here, but I'm not sure if those exist. But anyway.
One time he'd be useful.
I know.
We're in a sci-fi book club. We've seen enough things with miniaturized EMPs that, like, they gotta be sci-fi real. So.
That makes sense.
My real choice as a person who is a man of biology, and also a
what the hell does that mean?
you will see, my friend.
Are we all men of biology?
So the idea is that I am a little bit also potentially more vengeful than most. My idea would be that if we all have to die, I would want the government to at least suffer with me, especially that Sakamoto motherfucker. Because that guy, or Sakamochi, he was a total asshole, and he was obviously enjoying all the kids dying. I would totally want him to die, and all the other soldiers who were participating in it to die. So I would probably bring a biological agent. Something that would be relatively insidious, have a long latency period, you wouldn't pick it up, something really fucked up.
Would you just not social distance in current day society? You just take off your face mask and be like.
Thing is, COVID's a little bit too fast. COVID is symptoms within theoretically a week. I would want them and the soldiers to feel very safe. I want them to go back to report to the superiors, and their superiors report to their superiors. And by the end of this, the whole scenario, they're all fucked.
Wow.
And, at least the government, because all the military people who ran the program, they would be the ones closest in contact to the kids who were on the island, essentially. So it would be going down in flames in like a phoenix. I would self-immolate, but I would take down as much of the system as I could with me.
You would just destroy.
That's what I mean by man of biology. That's my device would be a biological weapon.
Okay.
This episode is so bad. Can we start over?
It's too late. We have to forge on. Wow.
I feel way better about my answer this afternoon.
Suicide.
Wow. Okay. All right. We have to.
Okay.
Let's just vote. We need to get this segment over with as soon as possible. So, to review the answers, my answer was some kind of radio 4G, 5G jammer in order to facilitate escape. Charlie's answer is a handgun, so he could not participate in the game, shoot himself and not participate.
Stavros, if you brought a 5G jammer, are you just giving everyone COVID?
I mean, it's possible.
It would have to be a 5G broadcast, not jammer.
Yeah. Totally different. Completely different thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, actually, would you, prevent everyone from getting COVID with a 5G jammer?
Maybe.
Oh, shit.
It's possible.
Oh.
So go with the government's not telling
I'm
you.
gonna keep this joke running as long as I'm on the show. Sorry.
That's totally fine. All right, so my answer, the jammer. Charlie's answer, the handgun for suicide to prevent participation.
One bullet. I like that. I like
One
that.
bullet.
I will take
Modified
that.
answer.
Yes. Adrian is a vape pen to absorb the power of teenagers that play Fortnite. I don't know. Your logic lost me a little bit there. I'm good with vape pen. I know that was your answer. And then Vincent's answer, the biological agent for vengeance that I'm sure would totally not turn into a pandemic.
These days I can go down for all I care.
It's just everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody, instant herd immunity of the 6 people that are left, maybe.
All right. I'll vote first. You guys are making this really difficult. These are all horrible options. Oh my god.
I'm gonna have to use the one bullet on yourself.
No. I'm gonna have to go with the vape pen power absorption. Adrian, I don't fully understand it, but I feel like when I watch these kids playing Fortnite esports, I'm like, wow, I should be like them, and now I know how to do it. So
And Stavros is like the lesser of 3 evils.
All right. Charlie, why don't you select?
I mean, unlike you, I am fully convinced about the vape pen argument. I'm going for that.
Okay. Adrian.
I can't vote for airborne AIDS. I just can't.
That's difficult. That's a hard sell, I feel like.
The handgun, because that's probably what I would have chosen first.
All right, good. All right, and Vincent.
I will vote for the jammer because it is not offensive. Offensive as in not going to kill anybody. I'm not absorbing the powers of teenagers to kill all my friends and my classmates. I'm not interested in that. I would much rather for the slimmest of slim margins of escape. And the jammer, if it works or doesn't work, is the closest thing to get to that. So
okay.
I will vote for Stavros.
Okay. All right, Adrian, you won for some reason. Congratulations. With your vape pen power absorption.
That was a little bit odd. I didn't anticipate vape pen being the choice.
Clearly, what is it, billions of hours of Battle Royale played over the internets proves Adrian right.
I think Charlie's right here. Well, great. Let's move on to our last segment, which is the thing you liked the best about the novel and the thing you thought was the worst about the novel. Our wrap-up segment. I will go first. The best thing, I mentioned it in the topics. I liked the theme that brought itself up at the end. The unification against Sakamochi, and by the way, the John Wick kill with a pencil that happens in this book, I thought was awesome. I'm wondering if John Wick took inspiration from this in order. It was the same pencil that they wrote "We will kill each other" or whatever. So I really enjoyed that. The main character is getting away, kind of fighting against the man at the end. I really like that. Unfortunately, going right into my worst thing, most of the book is not about that. Most of the book is about teenager murder porn, and I just found it very difficult to sit through. I was doing the audiobook. Very difficult for me to sit through it. I'm not sure I could have made it through if we weren't doing it for this show. I just couldn't. I mean, like I said before, I feel like the hook of the book is just this shock. 15-year-olds killing one another. I just didn't like it at all. So in my opinion, I think the bad outweighs the good there for this book. So that's my 2 cents. Let's go to Adrian. Adrian, best thing and worst thing.
Best thing is probably the Shinji storyline. I think that feels like a fairly, besides the kid hacker thing, a fairly realistic depiction of the mindset that one would go into this if they were to try to resist the government. And you didn't have a cheat code like Shogo has, right? In terms of having seen the game before.
Right.
I just like the way that played out. It really had a bunch of good dramatic beats to it, so that was nice. Worst thing, definitely the storyline with the otaku and his friend, and
Right.
that I just felt so uncomfortable reading that, and the way that they die, just oh my god,
Just not great.
so much. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's bad.
All right. Yeah, I can understand that. Okay, Charlie. Best thing, worst thing.
Oh, I was going to say, like, my favorite thing is just kind of the idea of building up all these kind of normal, if stereotypical, like, middle school, high school students being stuck in this horrible, horrible situation. Like, I just find it interesting as kind of just this, like, very extreme character study. Versus, I mean, my least favorite thing is Kazuo, just because he's kind of built in as this Terminator final boss guy for the game.
Right.
That kind of robs it of that theme throughout the book. I don't know. Like, I've heard a good quote is, if you don't understand how people could have been, like, terrible people in Nazi Germany, like, your average German went along with it, then that means you're probably the person who would just kind of go along with it because you got to do your own daily life stuff. So the fact that, like, most kids go insane or, like, buy it into it a little bit or, like, you know, kind of give in to the paranoia, I just find interesting to read through, even if it is kind of like a light novel genre version of that kind of analysis.
Yeah, interesting point for sure. I can totally see that. And an interesting point about Kazuo too, because you get his backstory in flashback form, and you meet him early on in the novel, but like for this, I feel like maybe at least the second half, he just turns into a, like, you never get his perspective ever again. It's always like the guy, like, chasing them.
I think you get his perspective for like one chapter right after he kills Mitsuru, and
his buddy,
like,
right?
and then he's doing stuff like a cart gets kicked to him and blows up a barn, yet he manages to get into a car and come out. Like, he's just a dumb like, he's
Literally
basically a sci-fi character.
Yeah.
Like, he's ridiculous. Like, he's the one character that, like, some of the characters I'm like, okay, they've kind of heightened the stereotypes a little beyond, like, what would be believable or kind of gets to eye-rolling points. But, like, they even put lines in the book as to, like, you know, maybe what was kind of a high school crush turns into you need to do your full-on confession when you're put in a crazy situation like this. So it's like, okay, like, it even goes out of its way to justify kids are doing crazy stuff because they're stuck in this crazy situation. But he's the one character where I'm like, this is stupid. Like, Mitsuko's basically is kind of there as well. So, like, the
He
two villains
flipped a coin, man. What do you need to do?
What do you want?
His coin didn't have a backstory. His coin needed to tell us why it was disturbed.
Like if he was, like, they had the spoiled rich kid as part of the book, but if they played it a little bit more like that, where he's like the ultra talented, but like totally, like, they could have done it without a bullet brain injury and him literally turning into a soulless Terminator.
Oh man, can I turn my answer to that stupid rich kid? That made me really mad too.
Well, that's the point. That's why I like the book, is they don't just give you the storylines for, like, the sad middle school student who was into pop idols. They give you the backstory of this, like, obnoxious rich kid who's like, I'm better than everyone and I deserve to live. And then, you know, he's no better than the other kids.
Yep, a lot of annoying characters for sure. All right, let's go to, last but not least, Vincent. Best thing, worst thing.
Character development was the best thing. I have to say that a lot of the characters in this, well, there are many characters I hated. There are many characters that I just did not see anything coming with respect to them, and I was just so interested in their storyline. So, like, there's this one storyline where, like, 6 girls who are friends hole up in a lighthouse,
Right.
and they're just friends, and they don't want to fight, they don't want to do anything, they just want to stay in the lighthouse and be good people. And one of them saw the main character Shuya kill someone and misunderstood it as Shuya is playing the game and he is a killer. So when he shows up, and him being the popular, popular kid in the class, everyone's like, yes, we saved Shuya, he's a nice guy. And this one girl was like, oh my god, he's a killer, and I saw him kill someone, and to save my friends, I need to kill him first. And she tries to poison him. She ends up poisoning her friends. Her friends then think that someone is trying to kill them actively and someone's playing the game. They all murder each other. And I just not see that coming. And, like, there's so many other interesting, like, character, like, playoffs where, like, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming, but I can see that if you're put in a high pressure scenario, why these really weird chains of events might happen. And I really enjoyed how the character development of bringing in their pasts kind of played into how these characters kind of decided to do their futures. So that was probably the most compelling thing to me about the book, was that there were so many characters I could hate that I couldn't wait to see die, and there's so many characters that I loved and characters I didn't expect anything out of that suddenly, like, did these heroic or, like, you know, selfless things, and I didn't know if they were going to do like something like very cowardly or do something great. And when they did end up doing whatever they did, I was always relatively impressed.
Like when
Character
Yuko
also.
kills herself, it's so sad after she
like-
got those girls all killed.
Yeah, I know. And then two girls were like, like a girl and a boy, or just boyfriend, girlfriend, and they just committed suicide. They're like, we don't want to kill anyone. We're going to take the rational way out. We're going to take the Charlie way out. We're just going to jump off the cliff. And it was like, like there are some very rational people here. Like there's a good mix of crazy people. And I go back to my statistical thing about the population being interestingly representative. But the one thing I hated, and it is a extenuation of what you guys were saying about Kazuo, it was like, I didn't hate Kazuo so much. What the fuck was up with his machine gun and the unlimited goddamn bullets?
It's so much
Are
ammo!
you fucking kidding me? Everyone like opens their backpack, like, I have a pistol with one magazine of spare bullets. That motherfucker killed everyone on the island with that Uzi and sprayed it every single time. It's like he sprayed the magazine into this body. Like he didn't just do one shot. He sprayed the body with bullets. He sprayed the car with bullets. It's like, what the fuck type of cheat code did that kid have to have infinite bullets to kill everyone on the island? Like his backpack must have been all ammo and an Uzi.
I mean,
It felt like a 90s
own-
action movie where like everyone shoots all the time and no one runs out of ammo. It's just
Yeah,
My-
it was
my
just
only
his.
ex-
It was just his gun. Everyone else ran out. Like the shotgun. It was like when they killed Kazuo. Like it was like, oh, I shot him. I only had one shot left. I left that shotgun there, and then we circled back, and I picked up that shotgun that like I had left, and we killed him with it. It was like, oh my god, like it could have been better planned, but that guy just had infinite bullets. What the hell?
My one explanation for that is that the government doesn't really care if it's fair. They just kind of hand out the stuff willy-nilly, and it's like the more important thing is that there is a child murder tournament, and go do what you do.
Just also to clarify, wanting teenagers to die, not okay. Just
yeah, probably not.
yeah.
So Stavros, before we end,
Yes.
most gruesome part of the book, or just most ridiculous part of the book, is when the kid points the pistol at Shuya, and Shogo shotguns his arm off, and then he like runs to get the gun with his other arm that's still attached, and then there's like this horrific explanation of how his torso is just blown off with like intestines everywhere, with the trash bin of a meat sausage factory or something like that.
Oh yeah, and Adrian, to respond to your point about no teenager should die, Kazuo was kind of a fucked up guy. He was killing all sorts of people. So by the time the book was kind of wrapping up, I was like, I mean, he's murdered like 40 people in this class. Like this guy probably should die, and put him out of his misery. Like he's just a rabid dog. Like I don't think he'll notice if he dies.
Vincent, advocate of teenager murder, right here.
Yeah,
No,
I think I put a hard line there. It's like, we
just
should
some.
not want teenagers to die, period. Just, yeah. From that
I
Yes.
don't want anybody to die.
Yeah, no death. We do not advocate for any death on this show.
No, people don't go out and attaching exploding collars on people and putting them into death tournaments on islands, okay?
Yeah, please
Bad
don't.
idea.
Please don't.
No, it's fun for a light, kind of genre fiction novel that we're reading for a book club from the 90s. Don't do it for real.
We're done, right? We can go play Apex now?
Yes.
Yeah, and go kill
let's
people.
go load up some Apex.
Kill other people who are probably teenagers online multiple times and laugh at them when we kill them.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nobody
jeez.
was doing a floss dance as they got shotgunned or like machine gunned to death.
Oh my god. Let's end
Look
this
how far
episode.
Battle Royales have come.
Since the 90s, yeah. Let's end this episode as soon as possible. All right, that wraps up our discussion for Battle Royale. Of course, if anyone has any feedback or suggestions on the books we should read and discuss, you can reach us at subplotofcourspodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter at subplotpodcast. And for next month, we're going to be reading a book called The Punch Escrow by Tal M. Klein. Should be an interesting read. Say goodbye, everybody.
I'm just sad that there's no video to fade out of me doing the floss dance.